Believe it or not, we have Father Kirby, who's the author of a book called Journey to Mount Carmel. Father Kirby, welcome to the Terry and Jesse Show.
Thank you, Terry. It's good to be back on the show.
I'm glad to have you back. Every time you write a book, I end up reading books of yours, and I love them, and I learn so much. So thank you for that. Jess Romero is with us on Interstate 10. We're going to be going back and asking you some questions. We have the book up on the screen right now for people to take a look and hopefully purchase that book for the new year. I like in your introduction, Carmelite Spirituality to the Catholic Church, A Journey to Mount Carmel. It's a 9-day preparation for an investiture into the brown scapular of Our Lady. Father, give us the origins of the brown scapular, and if you don't mind, a short history of it, please.
Yeah, so in order to understand the power of the brown scapular, first, if we go back even to the Old Testament, Mount Carmel is actually a real mountain range. It's in the northern part of the Holy Land. And throughout salvation history, it was known as a place of refuge, of protection. We could say rejuvenation, because the springs of Mount Carmel, the water was very refreshing. So even the physical, demeanor and environment of Mount Carmel kind of lent itself to a type of spirituality. Again, God is our protector. God is the source of our rejuvenation. God is the living water, and so on. So we see this, and in particular, the prophets were really very moved by Mount Carmel, and oftentimes went there. Of course, most preeminently is the prophet Elijah. We hear about that battle between the priests of Baal and the prophet Elijah there on Mount Carmel, and other prophets we see went to the various caves and crevices of the Mount Carmel range in order to reflect, to pray, to be protected, to commune with God. And early in the Christian tradition, there were a bunch of hermits that would go to Mount Carmel. And they were kind of continuing this spiritual tradition of listening and waiting for God. And they had various mystical images and experiences with Our Lady. So very early on, they associated their spirituality with Our Lady. And then in the course of time, the needs of the church, these hermits became friars, so mendicants, kind of like the Franciscans and Dominicans. And Our Lady gave the brown scapular to St. Simon Stock, who was one of these friar Carmelites. And then, of course, the scapular for the religious is full length. It covers the entire front and back. We see it with religious sisters and the friars. The abbreviated version that we're oftentimes associated with, the common version we might know, is actually just two small pieces of wool worn with cords. A portion is worn on the front, the portion on the back of the person. And that scapular comes from this long tradition. It's a reminder to us of our consecration to Jesus Christ, of the spirituality of waiting and listening for God. And I think in the contemporary times, in a secular age, it's particularly important. It can be helpful to Christians just to be reminded of God's presence and of our call to follow him. We live in a world that tells us God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So anything we can use, especially from the spiritual treasure of the church, especially one that calls us to acknowledge God's presence, to wait for him, to listen to him, I think it's very much needed today.
Well said, Father. I forgot to introduce a little bit, because you've been on our show several times, but Father, you have you're a papal missionary of mercy. You're the pastor of Our Lady of Grace Parish in South Carolina, and you're also a professor of the theology at the Belmont College. You also are a senior contributor to the Crux News site, which is great, and the author of several books on spiritual, moral, and pastoral subjects. So you've written a lot. You've got a lot of experience in this new book that you're sharing with us. I hope and pray people will purchase it. Father, I'm right off the bat. How can people get a copy of that book?
Yes, I would say the book's available through the publisher, Sophia Institute Press.
Great publisher.
It's also available on EWTN's religious catalog.
Excellent.
I want to encourage people not to, don't support Amazon. I really want to encourage people to our Catholic resources. And then, of course, Jesse and Terry, we have, these local Catholic bookstores
Amen.
that can oftentimes order these books for people. I have to support our own. It's just shocking how many times we can know what we're called to live, what we're called to believe, and yet we find ourselves supporting corporations that are at odds with our way of life, and especially with options. So the publisher, EWTN's religious catalog, and the local Catholic bookstores.
Awesome. Jesse.
Walk us through how one becomes invested in the brown scapular.
Yeah, so investiture, actually, in terms of the Carmelite order, it's actually very simple. Any priest can invest in the brown scapular. Of course, a Carmelite priest is always the most favored. It's within their spiritual family, but any priest can invest a person. There's no formal preparation. So the 9-day preparation I wrote for the book is a devotional exercise. There is no formal preparation for the scapular, for the investiture in the brown scapular. So it's actually very simple. If you're a baptized Christian, you can petition any priest, ask any priest to be invested. Now, I will tell you both, the reason why I wrote the book was because so oftentimes I'm huge on the brown scapular, constantly promoting it, constantly encouraging it, and so on. And in the course of time, people kept asking me, well, what do I do to get ready? They said, look, I have to do 33 days to consecrate myself to Jesus through Mary. There's all these other preparations. Like, shouldn't I do something if I'm going to be invested in this special way and committed to Our Lady in this special way? And I said, gosh, it kept coming up. And I thought, well, let's go ahead and prepare one. So the Carmelite order does not have an official preparation. Again, I wrote this one as a devotional exercise. I think it can help people just to have that 9-day preparation. I picked 9 days because of our custom of a novena. So investiture, very simple. You're a baptized Christian, you ask a Catholic priest, you can be invested. But I think we can do a little bit more, and hopefully this book will help.
Father Kirby, I love the idea of how all of these consecrations are tied into our baptism. So I want to ask you how the investiture into the brown scapular assists in living out your baptismal promises. Where's the key? Where's the connection?
Oh yeah, Terry, I got a lot to say about that. But I'll hit some some bullet points, some highlights. Yeah. First, here's what happened in our recent church history.
Yeah.
The Second Vatican Council called for the promotion and the encouragement of pious traditions.
Yep.
But it said that these pious traditions were to be placed within the liturgical year in the context of the Paschal Mystery, basically that the faithful were to be taught about these pious traditions, because sometimes there can be, some slipping into, superstition and various things of that sort and so on. Okay, fine. Well, that's what Vatican II asked for, which we're all in agreement with. Well, regrettably, what happened is after Vatican II, the pious traditions disappeared. So processions, scapulars, novenas, litanies, medals disappeared. Yep. Beloved and oftentimes generations old traditions and pious customs were just completely removed, discarded, mocked even.
I agree.
By some religious and priests. So in many respects, there's this kind of reaction to pious traditions, and people still kind of think there's this residue of, Vatican II did away with all that. We're not supposed to have those. And I've written articles where I've cited Vatican II. Yeah. And actually, Paul VI, a decade after Vatican II, has to write a document on the rosary to tell the people, the faithful, yes, you're still supposed to be praying the rosary. This is still important. And in the midst of that, kind of highlighting these pious traditions and placing them within the context of our discipleship. So first, just to kind of address that in terms of where these pious traditions fit, where they fit in terms of our discipleship, and to go back to that focus on the Paschal Mystery, our baptism.
Yes.
All these scapulars and sacramentals and medals and processions, they all point back to our consecration in Jesus Christ. So I tell people, look, if you're not baptized, a scapular can't do anything for you.
Exactly.
If you're not baptized, this medal can't do anything for you. Perhaps maybe give you the actual grace of conversion, so you might then get baptized. But all of this is hinged upon our consecration to Jesus Christ that happens in holy baptism. That's why for the book, I thought, for the preparation, let's go back to the baptismal promises. Because a lot of times for many Christians, it's just something we do instead of the creed on Easter Day.
Yeah.
And we don't think about them. They're not highlighted a lot. And I thought, no, these are 6 points, very important questions that go all the way back to the early church in terms of what it means to be a Christian. So I thought, let's retrieve the baptismal promises, place the scapular back within the liturgical tradition, which is what Vatican II really asked for.
Right.
And then let's fully dive into the graces and the beauty of the brown scapular of Our Lady.
Well said. Jess?
Father, does the brown tell us how the brown scapular, give us kind of the metaphysical understanding of how the brown scapular helps us grow in Christian discipleship. and it helps us to live as a little Christ in our society. And
yes,
and it gives us that, yeah.
Very much, yeah. And Jesse, I'm liking the words you're using. To highlight the word Christian simply means little Christ, and to emphasize that a lot of our early forefathers and foremothers, the early Christians, they didn't feel comfortable being called Christian because they saw themselves as followers of the way. They didn't think that they were worthy enough to be called Christian. It was the unbelievers who called us Christians, and eventually the name stuck. And the Scapular can help us in this vocation, our call to follow Jesus Christ, to be little Christ in the midst of the world, because every scapular, every sacramental we use, it relies on the grace of the sacraments. And it actually gives grace, what we call actual grace. Grace is actually given. The life of God, the presence of God is given by using these devotional practices. So praying the rosary, participating in a May procession, praying a novena, being invested in the brown scapular, all these are part of the devotional life of the church. They enrich our lives and they help us to both receive grace, but also to be reminded of the presence of God. And I think the brown scapular is I think, particularly important in this area because it's worn like a yoke almost, right? The scapular, again, it's worn by cords, and there's a portion on the front, portion on our back, and it reminds us of a yoke. And I emphasize that and tell people, let the brown scapular remind you that you are yoked to Jesus Christ.
I love that.
To him, right?
That's a great analogy, Father.
I tell you, and in the midst of the world, my heart goes out to the lay faithful. They live in a world that tells them God doesn't exist,
Exactly.
Prayer doesn't work, moral truth is garbage, on and on and on. And believers have to constantly fight against that. So my argument is, we need as much help as we can get. And if a scapular can help someone, even just having it physically on our bodies, sometimes as it moves around and shifts, it can remind the person, oh yeah, that's right. The Lord is with me. And of course, we have those beautiful prayers, those pious prayers that we can spontaneously pray. Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on me. Jesus, have mercy. Lord, I love you. And so on, these spontaneous prayers that can very much be a part of wearing the brown scapular.
Wow, we're going to take a quick break, but I want to remind everybody to get Father's book from Sophia Press. I can just tell you right now, any book published by Sophia Press is a winner. And what I mean by that is it's a solid publishing house. I endorse it 110%. Go to sophiapress.com to pick up Father's book, Journey to Mount Carmel. So when we